The first story. In my final year of high school, I enrolled in an additional math class at school. That year, my family was going through significant notable changes. One evening, while I was studying in the extra class, an urgent phone call required me to return home immediately. Time flew by, and when I arrived at the school, it was already pitch black, and the schoolyard had become deserted. My classroom was in the 11th grade building, while my car was parked in the 12th grade building. Since I had been attending classes in the 12th grade during the day and parked my car there, I had to walk from the 11th grade building to the 12th grade building to retrieve my car. As I was crossing the schoolyard, suddenly I heard someone calling my name. I turned around and looked around, but I didn't see anyone. Because the area where the lights illuminated the 11th grade schoolyard was still bright, I didn't think anything supernatural was happening. I simply assumed it might be my friends playing a prank and hiding when they saw me alone. Without thinking too much, I continued walking. When I was near the door of the 12th grade building, I heard my name being called again. This time, I carefully searched for anyone around, but I couldn't find anyone. On the third occasion, as I entered the 12th grade building, I heard my name being called very close, just inches away from me. A chilling sensation began to spread through my spine. Fortunately, there was another male student entering the 12th grade building with me. I quickly followed him and retrieved my car to leave. As there were no lights in the 12th grade building, only a faint glow from the street lights by the unknown name of the green tree, I felt even more mysterious and frightened. When I arrived home, I didn't dare to tell my parents, fearing they wouldn't believe me. In this modern age, few people believe in demons or ghosts. The next morning, I asked my classmates if they called my name. They all answered no and said they were focused on solving exercises at that time. They weren't joking but spoke to me seriously. They asked me what happened, and I just replied that nothing had occurred. Later, when I went outside and met the security guard, she asked me about what I stopped and looked at yesterday when returning home. I pondered for a while and asked her, "Do you believe that ghosts exist in this world?" She immediately replied, "When someone calls your name, go home right away. Don't answer when you don't see anyone calling." I understood deep down and thanked her, then I went home. Is that the extent of my story? I don't know if I misheard or not. If it were merely a misunderstanding, it couldn't have happened 3 times. And the third time was so close to my ear. If anyone has experienced a similar situation, I would appreciate your thoughts. The second story. My high school, MK High School, was built during the French colonial period and has been in existence for nearly 100 years. It is not only known for its long history but also for the most haunted stories in Saigon. Before I prepared for the entrance exam to the school, my uncle told me a famous story about MK High School. According to him, a horrifying incident occurred when the school was still named GL Girls School. A female student wearing the school's purple traditional long dress, known as Ao Dai, committed suicide by hanging herself on the clock tower. The last time the girl was seen, her hair only reached her shoulders, but after months of searching, her body was found hanging from the clock tower with her hair reaching the ground. Since then, her Ao Dai and her long hair have been kept and placed on an altar there. After I got accepted into the school, my neighbor told me another story. Her daughter had studied at MK High School for 3 years before. Once, when she attended a parent-teacher meeting, her daughter was the class president and studied in the building near the clock tower. She decided to explore the area. She was intrigued by a sign that said "Forbidden for students" at the base of the staircase leading up to the clock tower. At that time, my neighbor didn't know about the girl who had committed suicide on the clock tower. She was curious and later saw a janitor open the door and go up to that room. My neighbor quietly followed, climbed the stairs, and stood below, looking up. She saw a wooden door securely locked, but after she opened it, she peered through a large glass window and saw an altar with a hanging Ao Dai beside it. She felt a chilling sensation and quickly descended. When she returned, she shared the story with her daughter, who then passed on the famous ghost story of the school. I had heard many stories, but it was the forbidden sign that made me more scared than curious. Throughout my 3 years at the school, I never dared to climb up the clock tower, fearing expulsion. However, I heard that some students from previous batches took advantage of the school's traditional camping day to organize mysterious explorations. Some claimed to have seen something, while others said they saw nothing at all. Though I wasn't certain what had happened, I heard that many people had fainted upon witnessing something. Those who had studied at MK High School surely knew about it. Continuing the story about MK High School, during my time there, more than 2/3 of the school still maintained the French architectural style. The main difference from modern schools was that the classrooms were connected like a house. However, To create convenience, the government had partitioned some classroom space to create corridors. As a result, the corridors in the building became very narrow, only enough for 2 people to walk side by side, and dimly lit, as they were inside the building and not outdoors like modern corridors. Consequently, the corridors appeared deep and captivating. Once, after school hours when all the students had left, the corridors were closed and the lights were turned off, making it dark. As usual, the security guard carried a small flashlight to check the rooms, ensuring that all fans and lights were turned off and there were no remaining students. The guard entered a classroom and suddenly saw a figure sitting alone at the back. He turned on the flashlight and loudly asked, "Haven't you left yet? Do you want to be punished?" There was no response. The security guard felt something was off, so he quickly turned back, ran to the front of the corridor, turned on the lights, and rushed into the classroom. At that moment, the classroom was empty, with no one inside. It couldn't have been a prank by students because the corridors were narrow, and the exit at the end was locked from the outside. The security guard had carefully locked all classroom doors after checking them. The only way out was where the security guard ran to turn on the lights. After that incident, the security guard quit his job immediately. Now, when I think back and retell the stories of MK High School, I get goosebumps all over again. The third story. The story takes place on a dark evening when I was still young, lost in the midst of a hide-and-seek game with my neighborhood friends. At that time, our neighborhood was engulfed in the darkness of the night, making everything more eerie. The school we decided to play in was an old, rundown building with only one classroom. The only thing separating my house from that school was my grandmother's house. Among my group of friends, my older sister and a few others were there. We weren't exactly sure of our ages, but we were definitely too young to be in first grade. It was a challenging time, unlike today, as I didn't have the opportunity to attend kindergarten. Our school was impoverished, without electricity, and once the sun set, it became pitch black. On that day, after we finished playing our game, with laughter and cheers echoing on the school grounds, we suddenly stopped. Our eyes turned towards the front, where we saw the figures of 2 girls. Those girls were dressed in white tie and black pants, but we couldn't see their faces. They walked straight into the school, right in front of the playground where we were playing. The terrifying thing was that the 2 girls seemed to be floating, stopping at the 2 pillars of the old school. We stood there silently, unable to move, unable to do anything except gaze intently at those strange girls. Although the distance between us and the 2 girls was just a few meters, none of us could see their faces. The atmosphere around us turned cold and haunting, as if a supernatural force was present right before our eyes. While we all stood like statues, not daring to make a sound, the 2 strange girls suddenly vanished. We couldn't believe what we had just witnessed. After a while, we regained ourselves and started running hastily back home. Later, we recounted the incident to the adults. They informed us that 2 sisters had died at that school in the past. The words of the adults touched upon our fearful hearts, and since then, that story has been etched in my mind for over 20 years. For me, those dark memories never fade. The image of those 2 ghostly girls still haunts my dreams and refuses to be forgotten. Even as I've grown up, I still sense the lingering fear and horror from that day. The story remains like a ghostly apparition in my mind, always reminding me of the existence of supernatural worlds and things that cannot be explained by simple theories.